US President Joe Biden and the Chinese leader Xi Jinping had a virtual summit today. Some of it was conducted in public. The platitudes at the start, really.
It seems to me we need to establish some common sense guardrails to be clear and honest where we disagree and work together where interests intersect, especially on vital global issues like climate change.
China and the United States need to increase communication and cooperation. We should each run our domestic affairs well and, at the same time, shoulder our share of international responsibilities and work together to advance the noble cause of world peace and development.
Yeah, who knows about the real argy-bargy behind closed doors. But the rise of a belligerent China is the dominant global security challenge now. And tonight on Sky News, we air the first episode of China Rising, a powerful documentary hosted by Pete Stefanovic about Australia's China Challenge. I spoke earlier today to Pete. To get us there, here's some of the China Rising promo.
China's armies are marching.
Insiders reveal the hard truths about China Australians can't afford to ignore. Do you believe that war is coming?
That is a risk. There will be very serious consequences indeed.
China Rising, tonight.
And Pete Stefanovic joins me now. Pete, great to talk to you. I've had a bit of a sneak preview. You've got to be really happy with the complex and compelling documentary series you put together, but the timing of it just couldn't be more apt, could it?
No, exactly. And I guess it wouldn't have mattered when we released this documentary this year, because China has always been at the top of the news agenda for one reason or another. But now that you've got these comments that have come from Paul Keating, you've got meetings that are going to take place over in the United States at the moment too, between Xi and Biden and everything else. Everything that's going on at the moment in China seems to be a top story wherever we go. It's
the number one challenge in the world at the moment, economically, politically, strategically.
Militarily, too. I mean, that's what all the talk is about at the moment, and whether we need to be worried about it, whether we need to be fearful about it, we just need to be prepared, because China is certainly preparing for something.
It's amazing how quickly things have turned. Of course, it's been such an immensely important country to us and the rest of the world for a long while. But we go back less than 10 years ago, it was all sweetness and light. We're talking about the free trade agreement and us being almost an intermediary between the US and China. Now, as you say, talk of armed conflict is very much front of mind.
That's where we begin the documentary too, because, I mean, it wasn't so long ago that free trade agreement was signed off on. You had Tony Abbott, you had Xi Jinping out here, and, we were sharing glasses of wine. Everything was rosy. It did not take long for things to turn. And we've got Tony Abbott talking about this, we've got John Howard talking about this, and many others talking about this too. Almost immediately, Xi's regime became much more authoritarian. And so where is it going? It's got to the point now, Taiwan may well be the flashpoint where the West and a great portion of the world, as a matter of fact, has got to say, well, hang on, this is a bit much. We've got to stop this.
That's always been the worry, a flashpoint over Taiwan, defended by the US, Australia dragged into it, perhaps Japan as well. And it was astonishing last week in the lead up to your documentary that former Prime Minister Paul Keating seemed to just wipe his hands of Taiwan.
Taiwan is not a vital Australian interest. Let me repeat that. Taiwan is not a vital Australian interest, We have no alliance with Taipei. None. There's no document you can find. We do not recognise it as a sovereign state, right? And under ANZUS commits us to consult in the event of an attack on US forces, but not an attack by US forces, which means Australia should not be drawn, in my view, into a military engagement over Taiwan, US-sponsored or otherwise.
Paul Keating there, Pete. Now, no one wants to beat the drums of war. No one is eager for war. But just to wipe your hands of Taiwan, a free country, 25 million people, similar size to Australia, it's extraordinary, really.
That's why we need to be worried about this. And in fact, beating the drums of war, China's doing a fairly good job of that too, mind you. It was only a couple of months ago that Xi Jinping, he basically outlined what his plans are. He wants Taiwan. He said this at the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party in Beijing in Tiananmen Square, and the hope was to do it peacefully. Well, look at what's going on between China and Taiwan at the moment. There is the grey war tactics that are almost daily. Joseph Wu, the Foreign Minister of Taiwan, he appears in our documentary as well. Grey war tactics, cyber warfare that's taking place, not to mention the flybys, the hundreds of flybys that have happened over the past 12 months into Taiwan's defence zone. Does that sound peaceful to you?
Yeah, exactly. Now, you've also spoken to former Prime Minister Tony Abbott about these issues, and Tony Abbott gives us the alternative point of view, why it's right to at least say now that we have to take a keen interest, the world has to take a keen interest in the future of Taiwan.
I think it's important that the rest of the world makes it crystal clear to Beijing that there will be very serious consequences indeed were there to be any move on Taiwan. Well, Taiwan is a democracy, a pluralist democracy of 25 million people, and why shouldn't a democracy of 25 million people in the South Pacific be concerned about the fate of a democracy of 25 million people off the coast of China?
Yeah, look, Tony Abbott, no surprise. I mean, I agree with that point of view. I think most Australians would. No one wants war, but you can't just wipe your hands of a pluralistic democracy. What do you think we're going to see in the next couple of years? I suppose that's the $64 million question. But China clearly thinks it's got a weak president in the US at the moment. Would they seek to take advantage of that?
You know what? The interesting thing about the United States is that we've got Mike Pompeo appearing in the documentary too. And, you know, he's a China hawk, and, you know, his critics will say, well, he's pushed back too far when it comes to China, and the former US administration did. Well, the Biden administration hasn't exactly diverted much from what Mike Pompeo has done. So, I mean, in many regards, they agree with what he's doing. So Joe Biden, I suppose, from what I can tell at the moment anyway, is just going to keep that kind of angle, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there's been no change really in the setting. It's a matter of whether
significant.
And you've got the whole military apparatus and installations that are, and the strategic approach, diplomatic approach that doesn't shift overnight. I do want to just get your thoughts finally though on the changes inside China. People underestimate what we could see in China in coming years, and you spoke to former Prime Minister John Howard about that. Have a listen to John Howard.
I don't think that there's a proper understanding of the governance challenge the country will face as more and more people are born into middle-class affluence. Those people are going to want a say in running their lives.
John Howard there, Pete. This is fascinating. People have been waiting for the bloom of democracy, I suppose, or liberalism in China. But as people become wealthier, they have a huge middle class, we can expect to see political upheaval in China.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great point that John Howard makes on many great points that he makes. You know, and there is something to be celebrated in China's story, as you know. You know, 850 million people have been dragged out of poverty in the middle class. I mean, that's something that's worth celebrating. But now it's gotten to the point where, you know, the nation is bullying others, and that's going to be a problem. But as John Howard says, if it's not outside forces that end up being, you know, a headache for Xi Jinping, it'll certainly be internal.
Fascinating stuff, Pete. Congratulations on the two-part series kicking off tonight at 8 o'clock.
Yep, look forward to it. Tune in.
Yeah, I recommend it thoroughly. It's the biggest issue of our time, and it's a cracking documentary series. Watch it at 8 o'clock tonight and tomorrow night. Otherwise, set it to record on your Foxtel box.